In this video, we're going to look at the drawing materials that you're using in the course. So we're going to look at the graphite pencils, the different charcoals that we're using, the erasers, the blending tools, and how to sharpen the different mediums. Okay, so looking at the pencils, now you're probably more used to a pencil looking like this, right? Regular pencil, where there's graphite, like a thin bar of graphite in the center, and it's surrounded by wood, right? And these are great, but I'm actually wanting you to use these, which are woodless graphite sticks. So basically, the entire thing is graphite, and it's just surrounded by a thin sleeve of plastic, I guess, and that can be taken off as you work with it. And there's a specific reason why I want you to use these for this particular course, because a lot of your drawing with pencils is going to be at home in your sketchbook, and I'll show you in a little bit why it'll be great to use these. So looking at the pencils, and I'll kind of put them in the order here. You can see these numbers in the letter B here. So you got a 2B, a 4B, and a 6B. And hopefully you have at least one of each of those. And if you did have a regular pencil, drawing pencil, you may have other grades of pencils, such as an H and a 4H. So basically the way it works is the B's are your softer graphite. So that means that basically what graphite is carbon that comes in a powder form, but in order to make the actual sticks of carbon for the pencil, it's actually held together with a glue. So the more glue it has, that means the harder the graphite is. So those are your H's. So if you see the letter H, that means it's a pretty hard pencil. And so if I were to make a mark with this 4H, then I can make really light lines and light tones with that 4H. So that's great if I'm doing some realistic drawing and I really need some light tones. H's are great. And the higher the number on the H, then the harder it is. So the regular H will be a little bit softer than the 4H. So I can get a little bit darker with that. But if you have these, that's great, but you're not required to have the H's. For the most part, you're just going to use the 2B, the 4B, and the 6B. So the letter B, think of it standing for bold. And so these graphite sticks, they have much less binder or glue. So they are much softer, and so they can give you a much darker mark. So let's say if I take the 2B and I make some lines here, just kind of together like this, and not much pressure there. So I take the 2B, now I'm going to use the 4B, and right beside it I'm going to make some marks, and I'm basically using the same pressure that I used with the 2B. And notice how it's much darker. Again, that's because the 4B is much softer than the 2B. And now the 6B should be even darker. Again, it's the same pressure. I'm not bearing down any much more than what I did with the 2B and the 4B, but you can see there's definitely a value difference between those. So that will give you some pretty good variation of tone. So that's important to know about the different pencils. Now what about just using the pencil? Now we're used to using a pencil like this, or a pen, like if we were writing our name, right? We're used to that. Nice control. But that's just if we're writing small little areas, just letters and numbers. But when we're drawing, we actually want to be able to maneuver things a little bit more easily. So what I would like you to do is actually hold the pencil not necessarily right in the middle, but somewhere around here. So that will give you the ability to move the pencil around a little bit more. So this would be good for lines that are this long. If you need longer lines, maybe you need to back up even more. And so that gives you the ability to make even longer lines. Now you may have a little bit harder time controlling it the further back you hold the pencil, but hopefully the more that you use it, then you'll be able to control it even more, and later we'll learn techniques that will help you with that. And of course, if there are ever times when you needed to do some really small little controlled marks, you could hold it closer, and that's fine. So another advantage of that is that as you're drawing, I can see the drawing. If I'm drawing like this, my hand is covering what I just drew and possibly smudging what I just drew. So if I hold it back, then I can see what I'm drawing a little bit better. Okay. Another reason why I'm having you get these pencils is because unlike the regular pencils, so if I take this is the H, and these are great, and these as well, for making lines like we've been doing here. So making line marks, but sometimes you actually need to hold the pencil on its side and do some shading with the pencil, with the side of the pencil. And with a regular pencil, it's just a smaller area, and it takes a while to build up the value with a regular pencil. With something like this, I can actually, again, holding it, look, I'm holding it differently, not like this. This is good for if I'm using the point of the pencil, but if I'm using the side of the pencil, I actually want to hold it like more like I would the charcoal stick. And so now I can make much broader value areas with this pencil. And the same thing, so that was the 4B, so if I use the 2B, then I can use that as well, and it'll give me a lighter tone, hopefully. Yep. So that will, especially when we start shading, that means you can use these in your sketchbook, and you can make some pretty quick shaded drawings with these tools. Okay, so next let's look at your charcoals, and I had having you get two different types. One is the vine charcoal, so it should come in a package, might look something like this. And the sticks are pretty long, very long, thin sticks. So vine charcoal is basically just vine sticks from a vine, like grapevine or whatever, and it's just been like carbonized, like all the moisture has been taken out, and it's basically just almost like a fire. You can sometimes find charcoal, like if you go in the woods after a fire, you might find some natural charcoal. So what you can do, and I suggest doing this, is actually breaking it into pieces, roughly about this big, just because it's so soft that using a long piece can be frustrating because it'll break as you use it. So with the vine charcoal, you can obviously make lines similar to the pencil, but the type of variety you can get is pretty wide in terms of its lightness and darkness. So I can make very light lines, barely touching it, the paper, and then adding more pressure, and I can make thicker, darker lines. And I can make very broad tonal areas. So this will be a medium that we're going to be using a lot in the classroom. And another thing that's great about the vine charcoal is that, say you're drawing, you're making some lines, and you think, oh, that's just not right. You can just smudge it out with your hand and change it and draw right on top of it. So it's very easily changeable. All right. The other charcoal is the compressed charcoal, and it'll come in a packet like this, and it will also come in a 2B, 4B, and 6B variety. You might have like 2 2Bs, 1 4B, 1 6B, or 1 2B, 2 4Bs, 1 6B, something like that. And if you look at one of the sides of the charcoal stick, you might be able to see the actual grade of it. Like I think this says 6B. Yep. So this is a 6B, and I can tell you can also tell just by marking your hand. If it comes off easily like that, it's probably a 6B. Whereas like this is a 4B. So it's coming off pretty well, but not like it was with the 6B. And so one of these is probably that's a 6B. Let's see, a 2B. Oh, that's probably the 6B. I'm trying to find a 2B. Yeah, this is hardly coming off at all. This is definitely a 2B. So you can have different gradients with the compressed charcoal. So compressed charcoal is basically just like the vine charcoal. It's carbonized wood, except it's just much denser. So it's a denser charcoal. It's much harder, but I still do suggest taking your stick like this and breaking it in half, just because it's easier to work with. And it'll also give you multiple edges. And so the sharp edges are great because they actually give you very nice sharp lines. And it is much harder to erase. You can still erase it, but it's not like the vine charcoal, which is so soft. You can just take it off with your hand. So you can do a lot of line work. You can also draw into the vine charcoal. So a lot of your drawings in the classroom may start with vine charcoal, and then you may draw on top of it with the compressed charcoal. So you can almost think like the vine charcoal is just you trying things out, and when you feel more confident with your lines, then you can just draw it with the compressed. So of course you can use the side of the charcoal like this. You notice how like the paper is also giving a look, it's also working with the charcoal to give an effect. Because of the texture of the paper is there. But if I needed it denser, then like maybe this is definitely darker. So I'd get the 6B if I needed a totally dark area. With that 6B, I can totally fill that in and get really black with that. So there's a big difference with the pencils. The pencil is hard to get these rich blacks with the graphite. Okay, so those are the charcoals. Let's look at another drawing medium, which is not usually considered a drawing medium. It's usually considered something that you use to fix things, to fix your mistakes. And those are your erasers. So there's actually two different types, or three different types really, but two main types. One will be your hard eraser, and this will come in something like this. It's been broken off, but it's basically a hard white eraser. And also a kneaded eraser, which is a softer eraser. It'll come like this, but when you take the packaging off, then it's basically like this, like silly putty. And so you can use both. You can use them both for the pencil, for the graphite, and for the charcoal. But I would suggest actually taking your hard eraser, cutting it in half, and then using one half of that hard eraser for your pencil work for the semester, and the other half you're going to use with the charcoal. So that way you're not mixing, because you can see this is my charcoal one, and it gets pretty dirty, and I can clean it. I can rub it on some sandpaper or my jeans or whatever and clean it. but it doesn't get fully clean. So I wouldn't want to use this with my graphite work. Same with the kneaded eraser. Like I would open up your kneaded eraser, break it in half, use 1/2 for the charcoal and 1/2 for the graphite. If you need to, you can put them in different compartments, you remember. The other eraser, which is basically a hard eraser, is the click pen eraser. And this will be great when later on when we're doing some detail erasing and work where we need to get in and erase little areas and stuff. And I'm just having you get one, so probably most likely you'll be using it with the charcoal more so than anything else. Okay, but let me show you the difference in using the hard eraser. So obviously with the hard erasers, that's when you really need to get in there, erase larger areas. And erasing isn't just getting rid of mistakes, it's also, say you needed to lighten up a value, and get in there and lighten an area. So that's what's great about the hard erasers, then you can get in there and change it pretty easily. And also, let's say I have an area of tone. Let me use and I want to kind of sharpen this edge. Well, I can use the eraser to bring that edge back. And then of course I could always go back and sharpen that edge again with the charcoal. So now I have a nice sharp edge. And that can be changed also with blending, which I'll show you in a little bit. Now the kneaded eraser is great for, say you just need to erase just very lightly. Like say this is a little bit too dark and I just want to take this off a little bit. I can do that. Now the thing about getting it clean again is a little bit different. So with the hard eraser I can just sort of rub it on my jeans or something. And this one I have to kind of like spread it around. So I can't take it off, I just kind of spread it out like this, and eventually your charcoal half of your kneaded eraser is just going to become this really black mess and unusable. So that's when you'll have to get another one, but it'll probably take a lot of time before that happens. Another really great thing about the kneaded eraser is that say you need to erase just a small little area, kind of similar to this, but say you don't need it like this really hard thing here, but you just need like some soft little wispy, but it's a little small area. And you can kind of knead it to a little edge. So that's another reason why the kneaded is needed, right? All right. So now let's talk about your blending tools. And the two main blending tools, other than your fingers if you're just doing with the vine charcoal, but we want to avoid using fingers because a lot of the oils in our hands can kind of mess things up. So when we're really working on a long-term drawing and we're doing a lot of shading and blending, then we need blending tools. And the main blending tool for larger blending would just be a towel, paper towel. And the reason why you would blend, let's say I just need a softer tonal kind of gradation from dark to light. So blending allows you to do that. So from dark to this lighter area. The reason why you'd use these though would be, let's say you need to do it but for a smaller area. So let's say I have another thing here and I want to blend that, but it's just, if I use this, it's just a little bit too bulky. So I can use this one, and it's just, I'm able to blend that much easier. Another thing that's great about these is eventually they become kind of gunky, but still keep them, because even if they've got some charcoal on them, you can still use these as drawing tools. So for example, let's say there's an area of tone that I really need, but it's very light. Well, I can use the actual blending tool to put tone down, and maybe I can't get as light of a tone that with the regular charcoal. Like, that's as light as I can get with the actual charcoal, but with the blending tool I can get much lighter. Actually, there's none on there. Okay, here we go. So you can think of these as blending tools, but also adding tone to a drawing too. All right. Okay, so what to do with sharpening your tools? Obviously, with the pencils, you can use a pencil sharpener like this. But I like to, because since it's such a long thing, I like to actually use either just sandpaper. Let me find a clean piece of sandpaper. So I would use some sandpaper, and you can kind of just turn it in your hand. You can do that, or if that's not working too well, you could use a knife like this and just very carefully kind of whittle a point if you want a nice sharp point. And you can combine the two, like maybe you don't like how unsmooth that is, so then you just smooth it out with the sandpaper. And that works great and gives you a nice sharp point. Same thing with the charcoal. Now, you probably don't necessarily need to sharpen the fine charcoal too much. I mean, you can. I could use the sandpaper and make a little point with it if I wanted to, and get more of a point to that. But what's great about the sandpaper with the compressed charcoal is eventually, like when you start using the compressed, like let's say, let me use it up first. It's great, you can see how dark it can get. So look how like dull that is. So if I want to have a nice sharp edge again, then I can use sandpaper, and I can get four nice sharp edges, and then I have the ability to make sharper lines if I need them. Sometimes you don't. Maybe you want a blunter line, so you might have some of the charcoal sticks that are blunter, right? Let's get more blunt, and then maybe you need it like that. It all depends on what you need. You can make your tools do whatever you want. Okay, so that's the materials, the erasers, sharpeners, blenders, and then of course the paper is another factor. So your nicer drawing paper that you're using later for your shaded drawings will have different effects with the mediums than the newsprint. And of course your sketchbook paper will be more like your nicer paper.